Good evening, fellow Ambazonians. We are living at very interesting times when the Ambazonian people are making a lot of progress. At the same time, Cameroon is succeeding in trying to portray itself as still having control over the territory. People are concerned. People have worries. While the Ambazonia Governing Council is pursuing a national liberation plan, others are calling for a referendum. Who should the people trust? What path should the people take? What would work? What has worked? What will work? What will deliver results is what the Ambazonian people are interested in. Today we have the privilege to have, I think, one of the most important discussion, finding a sense of direction for the people. A conversation with the leader of the Ambazonian people, Dr. Cho Lucas Ayaba. Papa and Mami them, una good evening for all una. For any place where you did for the territory, whether you did for inside prison or you did for the refugee camps, we want salute all una, we greet all una, for all what defense soldier them, what people did for refugee camps, the one the way they stay for bush, where they don't burn their house them, we don't come, we bring una love, and one bring una hope. We salute all una. We know say, while our liberation struggle, it move forward. For the same time, when I get worries for una heart, when I get plenty question them. The egg of sea, it talks say make we go this direction. And this direction will help we make we work, make we end Cameroon a occupation. The other one they say no. Make we go tell the world, make a give we referendum for make the people they choose. Now which road the people they will take on? Now which side the people they will believe on? Now which you go walk? Now which you no go walk? Today, we don't come and forget the most important talk with the man we say Ino Road. Dr. Cho Lucas Ayaba. Make it tell we, wait you don't walk, wait you go walk, and wait you go carry away the breadway. Mr. Leader, good evening, sir.
Your place day, your place day. Your place day. I'm enjoying how you're breaking down the pidgin like those translators in Presbyterian church.
You want a liberation translation?
Oh, Jesus Christ. How are you doing,
sir?
spokesman? Congratulations. We've not had an outing since your appointment. And
No, we haven't. This is
thank you
our
for the
first.
incredible job.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm very honored to serve our people, the organization, and your leadership, always.
Well, so what's up? Well, I've listened to your introduction, so set the tone.
Well, you know what's going on in the world. You're here to talk to our people. It's a lot of events that have been happening on the ground. So that's a call for concern for a lot of Amazonians, but obviously not for you. So, so we are here to have that interaction with you. Can you help us to give us, in your introductory remark, can you give us your assessment of the state of the liberation struggle?
Uh, the liberation struggle is taking shape. It's taking shape. and I am very excited. Before I step in here, I was sending a message to the Boyo Military Council, and I mistakenly sent it to the Bui Military Council. So I was being advised that I've sent it into the wrong space, and I was just alerting Boyo that I'm aware that the enemy is in Fundong and other areas, and hoping they are doing fine. I also heard from our forces in Mezam. Um, I heard from our forces in Momo, Meme, and so the liberation struggle. And I would like our people. I don't want them to misconceive my my stubborn commitment to optimism. It's not to deceive them. It's just to give them an assessment of reality. I have said repeatedly, there will come a time when the struggle will take shape, and it will not be reflected. The key indicators will not be social media pandering and posturing. It is going to be critical assessment of the key indicators on the ground, the the core forces and their ability to organize and to fight and to be successful. There are indicators you may also want to watch from the side of the enemy. For example, the surrender of Shina Rambo and the excitement. So you really know that they are desperate. If they could, if they could take the surrender of Shina as something huge, then La Republique is really desperate because Shina has been out of the game, and uh, I'm trying to be very careful as he's been out of the game, and we even tried to bring him back into the game, and we provided an assault rifle so he could establish himself and rebuild his capacity. But he's been long out of the game. So if La Republique could take such a person and they're parading it at the highest level, then you can know how desperate Cameroon is. So I want to let our people know that this is a war. It's not a video game. It's a war of liberation against an enemy that is entrenched, against an enemy that has had tools of success that are known. Uh, Violence combined with high level corruption, attempt to use the oppressed people against themselves, recruiting from amongst the oppressed enablers and elites who can use propaganda, immense propaganda, to weaken the morale and resistance in the people. Thank God we have fine people like you and others who are out there on a daily basis, not only to counter that propaganda, but to construct a positive narrative, one that objectifies why we are struggling and then paints the butchers in a clear picture. I don't want us to look at this resistance battle by battle. You might, if you use that as a measure of success, you might feel a bit depressed certain times. It's a combination of strategies. The resistance in terms of the war effort against the military occupation, the constant hunt for the political leadership that legitimizes occupation, undermining of the ability of the enemy to make war through exploitation of our resources, ensuring collective resistance, whether in jail as it just started with the lockdown on the 19th or on the 20th, lockdown on Mondays, different activities in terms of banning of number plate, ensuring imposition of taxation as a reflection of territorial control, and international diplomacy that delegitimizes the enemy internationally and paints Ambazonia as the credible partner in terms of stability, continuity, and hope. So, this is a big picture approach, which I know that we are looking at it from the microscopic perspective through the war lens. But if you capture through, the big lens approach, you are going to really come to the clear understanding that Cameroon does not operate again as a viable state, and that we operate as a constituted authority representing the Ambazonian people. So I want to assure our people that, as I said the last time, we will bring the enemies to its knees. It will be held accountable for the crimes it has committed against our people. We will build a very powerful army that is constantly going to fight them. The core blocks are intact, whether it's in Meme, whether it's in Fako, whether it's in Bui, in Boyo, in Mezam, in Momo. The core blocks are intact. We are rebuilding the peripheries that should be taking the war to them on a daily basis. We will increase the amount of IEDs and create highways of death in such a way we impede their economic activities, their political activities, and undermine them using our territory as an asset for international loan schemes. And so I ask them to remain dedicated and to have a positive mindset despite the difficulties that comes with war. We will make things better for them during these times of trials and tribulation.
All right, thank you very much for those for that introductory remarks. Uh, Over the last few months, it's been a lot of talks going around. You committed the Ambazonian people through the international system, through Canada talks. You've never made a public statement. You've never informed the Ambazonian people officially what assessment you made. Was the timing right? Was Cameroon ready? Did Canada have the capacity? You've never had these discussions with the Ambazonian people. And it's now been almost 5 months that those talks ended. How come you didn't want to directly address the people, talk to the people? Why didn't you address the people at the end of those talks?
Because the talks have not ended, they've just gotten started. And so um, I am navigating a very fine line, leading a war within the context of a very agitative domestic population, and being able to protect the integrity of a particular process with a jittery enemy also requires a lot of maturity in dealing with those issues. And I've been monitoring key issues, and I've come to the conclusion that it is time for me to say a few words about what happened in Canada. But as I've stated through your office, that of the former spokesman, and all those who've spoken about the talks, it was a huge success. I mean, unrivaled success. And sometimes the details are totally irrelevant, but I will be able to talk about some details today so that people capture the success in context.
And the success and the context, can you inform the Ambazonian people your decision making processes? How did this come about? Are you the one who contacted the Canadians? Are you the one who contacted international partners to get Canada on board? Can you give us an idea of, you don't have to if you don't want to, in terms of what do you think it's still classified? How did all of this came about? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Ambazonia needs clarity from its leaders.
Well, I have, you see, this is social media. This is a social media era. And I'm trying to ensure that our people develop a nationalistic mindset. You know, our people must develop a nationalistic mindset. One, to protect the integrity of our liberation struggle, and number two, to trust in the leaders of the moment. If you do not develop a nationalistic mindset. If your mindset is subject to alteration because of manipulation and intoxication, you aren't ready. You aren't ready, and it's not my job to become a therapeutic agent all the time to release information as to be able to calm the Amazonian people. It doesn't work that way. So Amazonian people must believe in the things that I do, in the things that I say, that the AGOC puts out there. It really has to trust in us. All the propaganda and all the construction out there, they are normal situations. I recall in 1990, were you born by 1990?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 1990, when Cameroon went to the World Cup, they were facing Argentina, and I think the first match, and they really got some tough guys, including an Ambazonian Deepak Victor, and then you had another tough guy called Massing Benjamin. The prime target during that encounter was Maradona. I'm trying to use this as an analogy for Amazonians to understand why I am the prime target of anybody who has headache or has fever. The prime target was Maradona, and people were put to sacrifice their position in the match just to destroy Maradona, because they thought by destroying Maradona they would win the match. And Cameroon won the match, not because they destroyed Maradona, because Cameroon scored a goal. And so, within the context of the Ambazonian struggle, La République is focused on Dr. Cho Ayaba. That's La République's prime target. Any other thing is peripheral. They think if they decapitate me, and then Ambazonia loses the sense of leadership, focus, and stamina. And so you get all of this constructed stuff out there, people making career and fame for one day or two using my name, but they have a natural place where they reside at the end of their tenure, you know. So in terms of Canada, who contacted who, the former Canadian ambassador or high commissioner to Yaoundé reached out to me, as well as others, I suspect, and said Cameroon was willing to have a talk, and that was the first time I've been in touch directly with the High Commissioner, and we had a lengthy discussion with the Canadian team. I discussed with the Amazonian Governing Council, and I submitted a letter raising previous positions of the AGOC with respect to the Ambazonian side, and with respect to the motivation of Cameroon, and with respect to the position of the international system. I raised these concerns in a letter and followed by conversations with the High Commissioner and others. And I made the decision after consultation with the Ambazonian Governing Council. I consulted with the War Council. I consulted with General Efang, and he consulted with all the generals of the ADF, and I asked for permission. And after the generals consulted, they sent me an audio granting me the permission to delegate people to Canada. I went to the executive, I laid the case, and the executive voted and gave me the mandate to delegate persons to Canada. I consulted with top advisors who were no longer appointed advisors, and I got their consent and their informed opinion. That helped me a lot. I consulted with other international partners, and I used my own wisdom and the policy positions of the Ambazonian Governing Council to reach the following conclusion. After 3 years of the Canada intention, interacting with the international system, we have learned a lot in terms of the shortcomings of the Swiss intention, and they have understood our position clearly through various interactions, bilateral and multilateral. And I was comfortable that it was time to meet the enemy and make a case, a clear case to them, and to let Cameroon understand that they have lost, and that if they have made a decision to come to the table, we hope it's genuine to discuss based on the root causes of the conflict, and to arrive at a conclusion that is mutually beneficial to both peoples, secure stability within Cameroon, and full independence, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of Ambazonia in the hands of the Ambazonian people. And if you permit me continue, there were vast consultations with the IG, care of Comrade Seseko Ayuktabe, APLM leader Dr. Akwanga. Once we were clear that they were all consulted, we discussed with the CDN. The CDN was very, very helpful in providing substantive and procedural advice that helped shape the way we conducted ourselves. And I asked the other leaders that we meet in London to be able to concert and come out with a common position for Ambazonia on different issues. And we all gathered in London. I asked Comrade Ayuk to send a representative because I was a bit worried about whether I know his vice president was going to be there, but it was important that they delegate somebody to sit in the meeting to represent their interests from jail. And they did. We met in London and agreed on certain principles. We agreed on certain principles. There in London, we proposed Professor Carson Anyangwe to be a lead of the other delegates. And we agreed that we were going to work together as a team. Thanks to Dr. Akwanga in particular and VP Yerema of the IG, they were very instrumental in keeping the team together. They were very clear from there. Though the consortium was not invited for the talks, but they were part of the process with the other leaders. And I can tell you all the discussion about Ambazonian division melted away. It was very optimistic to see the bond amongst us in the name of our country. There were little issues which are peripheral. I'm not really interested in some of those peripheral issues. But we emerged from London with a body of principles that should guide us. And we asked Dr. Akwanga to fly into Canada and sit in any hotel so that if the delegates, because we were sending persons that have never been in negotiation before, but these were patriots dedicated to our homeland. And we wanted Dr. Akwanga to sit in any hotel. So if there are any difficulties, they could have a leader. Just knowing that the leader is not far away, they would walk in with a lot of confidence. We
Can
held.
you tell can you tell us what were the agreed upon consensus outcome that you all, when you met in London, what did you agree that as we are going into these pre-talks, these exploratory talks, here are our defined common position. Can you help us to have a sense of understanding? Can you help our people to have a sense of understanding on how what you all agreed on and how you work together to develop those common positions?
No, in London, we did not discuss the substantive issues because we were aware these were pre-talks. And our focus, especially I speak for the A-Gov-C on this, the focus of the A-Gov-C was to get a commitment from Cameroon to talk That was for us critical. The second critical issue for the AGOP was to get um, an international facilitator, that both parties, Cameroon and Amazonia, agree on an international facilitator. So while in London, I mean, all the leaders agreed on this common principled position, but the singular issue of interest was that we work together as Ambazonians. The AGOV-C has always and is of the position that when we go to represent, we go in as members of our movement on behalf of Amazonia. That is very important because at this particular moment, the substantive positions held are held by movements, not a government of a state. And so it was important that we go in as members of a movement on behalf of Ambazonia. Other leaders were more of let's go in as Ambazonians. We varied in that position, but we agreed that we must speak like one people, and that we will go in as a block. That we will go in as a block. This is the Ambazonia delegation. And within that Ambazonia delegation, there is the IG, there is the consortium, there is ARC, there is the APLM. But we will have our delegates work together and work together with the lead person which we had assigned, Professor Carson Anyangwe, to espouse common positions. And those common positions arose during the talks, and I will be able to go in more to discuss how we agreed on those common positions.
Okay, can you tell us those common positions since we're talking about the talks?
First, when we arrived at Canada, the first bone of contention was the Ambazonian flag. And first, let me explain how I made my decision. This is very important. When when I was making selection for delegates, I had a set of ideas. I we were informed. We had gathered intelligence that Cameroon was sending a kind of Fumban style ladies into Canada to seduce Amazonian team. I'm not certain who they wanted to seduce. And there was a particular lady in the team who had, in their preparation for talks, had acted like Dr. Cho Ayaba. I think it's a lady from the north. I had been informed even before Canada ever called for these talks. And so we were prepared. That's number one. Number two, in selecting delegates for the AGOV-C, I chose pragmatists. I chose radicals, non-radicals, and I had a combination. I wanted a woman to lead. I had selected first a man to lead, and then I decided to change my mind on that, and I selected the NSA, who is my top advisor. She calls herself Nguti Girl because she's a pragmatist, a tough person in terms of the issues, and she's not going to blink when it comes to the issues at bar, and she did wonderful. I also chose the former spokesperson, the BDC, to work with her, and the DDC's choice was very interesting. And I told him, I said, listen, I am sending you there to clear the ground. I gave him firm instructions. You are going there to clear the ground. You are known, you are feared, and so it's important you are there to bulldoze the ground for the pragmatists to be able to talk. And I selected your humble self because
Yeah.
you're a man of wit and you are practical and radical. And I selected the HHS, Comrade Akosong, Raymond as backup person also, because he's a no-nonsense person. At this stage, I was looking at no-nonsense persons because I know La Republique wasn't ready. I was looking at people who were nationalists, who believe in Ambazonia, who were going to defend Ambazonia with their blood. And I'm proud with what they did. I'm extremely really proud with what they did. But the first bone of contention in Canada was the Ambazonian flag. Um, I could not understand how we could go into any discussion with La République du Cameroun without a flag. I could not. And so our delegates were told they could not go in with a flag. And they got me up late in the night. And I said, no flag, no talks. No identity, no talks. Forget about it. And for me, it was over. I was willing to just pull the people out from that place. I'm not interested in these fake people, in these criminal butchers. And so if you don't want the Ambazonian flag, then forget about it. It took about 3 to 4 hours of back and forth discussion. And finally, our flag is, I don't know what it means to you, but that's all we have. It's like a sense of ownership. And we were in with our flag. It was such a joy. It was like, going into a theater and then taking your baby in. And it was such a joy for us. We went in with our flag, and for us, that small victory was very, very important for Ambazonia and for the delegates who were there.
And so the common positions that you all agreed. I know you've talked about the first topic of contention that was resolved. Was this topic of
First,
contention even the flag?
yeah, first the delegates. Incredible work done by all the delegates, even the ones we didn't agree with, like the delegates of Madame Maria. We call them the two Joes. They were incredible. Yeah, they stood for the land. They stood for the land. Brado of IG, Prof, and then you had the representatives of ARC, and the radicals from the APLM. So there were little tensions, but they stood for the land and they stood for Amazonia, and it was and the leaders, Jesus, there was no sleep. Okay, there was virtually no sleep, and there were back and forth, open discussions. I don't want to go into those little details. One day the delegates will speak about their experience, but we made a case for the commitment. Important for Ambazonia is that La République, you commit, because you've played along with Canada issue with Swiss issue. We want you to commit. So whatever La République threw on the table, and they threw a couple of stuff, including everything was on the table, including independence. They threw that on the table, but we didn't take any bait. We were focused on commitment and giving a mandate to whoever. And at that time, we were looking only at Canada. And so La République saw the necessity to begin discussions on the issue of commitment and on the issue of the mandate.
What about
And
what about what about the issue of identity? Identity, identity of parties to the conflict.
yes, we were represented as Ambazonia. Um, I will not go into some other transitional issues. They are irrelevant, and those are things that I don't want to throw out and give people some talking points. It was clear. It was a discussion between Cameroon and Ambazonia. there were some tweaking in initial documentation where the definition of parties were codified. In preliminary statements, the the the, the identification of parties were codified, because since these were not final documents, you do not want them to fall into the hands of people, and it becomes almost like final documents. So definition of parties were codified, and we didn't have any problem with that. But as we move forward, we were very clear about who we were representing and who the other parties were representing. They tried to play some fast ones, which we quickly squashed them down, because we had the sentiment that they had an agenda, that the agenda was being dictated by events in Yaoundé, and the agenda was to try to get Ambazonia to a corner that will become normalized as part and parcel of a process, because that has the implication of undermining the the resistance on the ground, where if you depart from that sense of normalization, the population might then see you as, the disruptor of an ongoing process. So we had this perception about what Cameroon really wanted to achieve, and because of that knowledge, we undermine. And since for the AGOC, we were ready to walk. We had no business making any compromise with La République du Cameroun. For us, we were ready to just move. There were other movements that were willing to sit in on every issue. We didn't have that luxury. So we dealt with the substantive issues from a very radical standpoint. It was take it or leave it. There were times when we made some tweaking, and I'll talk about them as we move forward on the what they call the CBMs, confidence building measures, the text of the commitment, and the text of the CBMs, the text of the mandate. That's where you find the substantive discussions, the back and forth, which was very tense, but also very, very, very fruitful for Amazonia.
Do you feel, are you confident that your leadership succeeded to achieve the predetermined outcome of the pre-talks on behalf of the Ambazonian people?
Absolutely. We are undoubtedly the most influential and powerful movement in the liberation space. And the position of the Ambazonian Governing Council is paramount in outcomes, whether within the domestic sphere or at the international level. So I have no doubt about what my leadership brought to bear on that particular outcome. And I will always say it was a collective process. The others made huge contribution in this process, but without the aid of C, we wouldn't have reached this level. Our weight was very critical for the credibility of the entire process.
And if that's the case, you said the process is still ongoing. Cameroon said there was no process.
Has Cameroon ever accepted that there is a war? It has never been accepted that we exist. So don't listen to what uh, those nincompoops are screaming in Yaoundé. What they say is totally irrelevant. They themselves don't even know what they are saying. You know, one important. Let me go a bit inside a couple of, one of the things why I've really avoided having this discussion is because we are, it's an ongoing issue, okay? It's an ongoing process. And we are dealing with a complex opponent in terms of its internal dynamics. Okay, and so I measure my words carefully when it comes to the issue of negotiation. It has been a key. Internationalization has been a key pillar of the Aid of Sea Liberation strategy, and negotiation is the culmination of that process. And I'm so proud of the Ambazonian people and the Aid of Seas for having brought us to this level. Because once your key pillar reaches its apex, irrespective of the outcome, you would say you've really achieved something. So we got Cameroon to sign a commitment letter to negotiate. And this is very important
Why? How
for any.
so?
Why?
How so? You said it's very important. You've emphasized the importance of commitment. You've talked about it. I think you've mentioned the importance of commitment about 5 times. Why is commitment so important to your leadership in terms of dealing with Cameroon?
Commitment is acceptance. For 62 years, Cameroon has been in denial. It has been in denial that we even exist. It has described us in all forms and shapes and and whatever. Whether we are les Biafran, les ennemis dans la maison, les Zanglofou, les 2 tips of sugar. It has. You don't know what it means for the butchers of our people who have virtually no respect for us to sit down face to face with us and take a pen and sign committing in front of the United Nations, in front of the Canadians and others, that they are willing to talk. You don't, I don't know, I cannot explain it. I'm really sorry. I cannot, it's a feeling, you know, it's a feeling.
A
In
feeling
the
of
mind of
acknowledgement. Is it a feeling of acknowledgement of the existence of the Ambazonian people? Is it a feeling of Cameroon acknowledging that Ambazonia is not part of its territory? Is it a feeling? What is? Help us linguistically, because you're a man of of words. Help us
it's
to capture what that word is, what this means to the Ambazonian people. What is the essence of this?
it is about the Ambazonian people. It's not about Cameroon. Okay? It's about the Ambazonian people. When the Ambazonian people go around with their activities daily to survive, there is a sense of loss. You see, Ambazonians are at this stage, they are afraid to even say they are Ambazonians. Ambazonians were afraid to talk about their name. Ambazonians were worried to talk about where they come from, whether you come from Kwakwa or you come from Alabukam. Ambazonians have been made to be ashamed of who they are. Okay, they've been made to be ashamed, and the enemy has used that as a price tag on our head to exact a price in terms of economic deprivation, in terms of torture, in terms of all sorts of activities. And for that enemy to capitulate in front of a people it has treated like dogs, in front of a people who have been ashamed of themselves, is a huge sense of relief. It's like a burden has been lifted up the Ambazonian shoulder that finally, they can take pride in themselves, in their identity, in their who they are, and that they've finally gotten the bully, you know, to recognize a reality that has been existing.
Are you satisfied with the outcome?
Oh yes. Look, listen, we went to Canada to get commitment and mandate. We got more. Yeah, we got more. During the negotiation on the commitment, I think that was, I think, the second round of talks. And we were moving towards Christmas, and we were like, all right, the two previous discussions have been back to back. So let's take a break. And one morning, we have to come back to Canada to have a conversation. And the vice president came and briefed me that it looks like we have to go to Canada again. I said, no, I need to know why. And that's where the first disagreement with the other leaders came about. I said, no, is it Canada convening or is it Cameroon requesting? I wanted to know if we just left Canada, what is the urgency? If it is Canada convening, let us know why. If it is Cameroon requesting, then Cameroon needs to write a letter spelling out the necessity for an urgent meeting. And we
That's
will
right.
conclave, we will send preliminary responses to Cameroon. And if there are points of convergence, we could now delegate our delegates to dot the I's and cut the T's. Without that, the AGOC, it's not participating. And so it was really tense. There was shouting matches over there amongst ourselves, but we finally met in Berlin. It was a meeting in Berlin with the Canadians, with the Swiss, the movement leaders. I didn't travel. I addressed, the vice president was there. I addressed the meeting via Zoom. And I wanted to know who is convening the meeting. And finally, they said it was Cameroon requesting the meeting. And I said, okay, I need Cameroon to send a written letter and spelling out the reasons why it's requesting an urgent meeting after we just left Canada. In the middle of a meeting, the a rep, I think from the Swiss, said Cameroon has just responded. And we were listening. They started reading the letter that Cameroon is asking for a ceasefire. It is it's prepared to withdraw its forces to the barracks and to dismantle checkpoints.
Were those counter offers from the Ambazonian people after Cameroon requested for a call for an emergency meeting? You requested that Cameroon should do that in writing through the Canadians. Cameroon did. They sent the letter that they want a ceasefire between Christmas and New Year. Once Cameroon made a request for a ceasefire, what were the counter offers of the Ambazonian from the Ambazonian side? And this is part of the confidence building measures, right?
Yes, it's part of the confidence building measures. And we were asked, the two peoples were asked to submit different areas in the confidence building measures. Ambazonia delegation submitted 4 issues in the confidence building measures. And those 4 issues were critical. Withdrawal of your forces. That was number one from our territory. Release of our prisoners. Justice, which there was. Every movement had a key area of interest. And so we worked together to make sure we capture those areas of interest for those movements and factor them in as an Ambazonian CBM position. It
Okay.
and it was interesting because some of the positions of the different movements overlapped. So the AGOC had these, the IG had probably had the same, APLM had its own, and the consortium had some different ideas, and it worked very well. It was withdrawal of forces from our territory and release of prisoners and issues of accountability and justice. I can't quite recall the fourth.
So, for the purpose of those that are watching and for everybody else, this is important. Cameroon requested for a ceasefire as part of the confidence building measures for the process. For the Ambazonian people, they made counter offers. For us to accept your ceasefire, you must withdraw all your forces during the period of the
No.
ceasefire.
Cameroon, in its preliminary offer, it had said it was going to withdraw forces
Okay.
and into barracks and dismantle checkpoints. So they
Okay.
made those points. Those were part of CBMs. The moment Cameroon made a request for ceasefire, we conclave and discuss whether that was possible, the intentions of Cameroon, and we submitted our counter offer. Counter offer for us was critical: prisoner release.
Okay.
For the Ambazonian team, this is complex. This is complex stuff. So it's a marketing strategy. So Cameroon wanted something that it can show its population or people that it has gotten from Ambazonia as a concession, and for them it was ceasefire. Okay, for Cameroon it was ceasefire. That finally they've gotten these radicals to at least ceasefire. It was important for the image of Cameroon. What was important for Ambazonia? The prisoners. That for us, what was important? Prisoners, because Cameroon had already submitted, it was withdrawing forces to barracks and stuff. So we were already working on, because this was the strategy of the AGOFC and the ADF. You know, during negotiations, parties tried to capture territory and use new territories captured for points of concession. And so we went immediately and began to map barracks that existed pre 2017 and barracks that existed post 2017. We wanted to make sure that Cameroon does not simply just come and play a fast one where it can create some barracks and then and remove them and say it has removed barracks, or it creates new checkpoints and remove them. So we quickly identified. I have the map of all checkpoints that they have across the territory and all barracks that were important for us. And so for us, we wanted all prisoners, and it was a very clear and strong position. We wanted all prisoners released, and we
So,
wanted to
Mr.
make.
President, Mr. President, this was part of the negotiation process, not something that somebody or one of the groups or a part of the groups. This was an inclusive Ambazonian
No,
process.
this prisoner release was part of our CBM, the
Okay.
Ambazonian CBM. So we went into our CBM and pulled out an element from our CBM and submitted as a counter offer, because Cameroon had argued that yes, they were willing to commit, they were willing to sign a mandate, but they want us to negotiate the mandate, accept it, negotiate the commitment, accept it, but don't sign it, and then negotiate the CBM, which for them was the ceasefire, and for us it was the prisoner release. And we said no problem. So we negotiated the commitment, cleared that, negotiated the spirit, the letter, the text, the context of the mandate, cleared that, went into the CBMs, negotiated it fully, and brought now both for signature. And in the commitment, we were clear. There was the point of contention, which was Ambazonia, that we are going to discuss. Who are we, Ambazonians? So Cameroon, we batted to and fought, and then agreed on a former UN Trust territory of Southern Cameroon's movements from this place, which was very critical. It was a reflection of our identity. And then
movement
the this
movement move, movement movement of the movement of the territory of former United of movement of former United Nations Trust territory of British Southern Cameroons. Yes,
yes,
that was
yes, yes, and then For us, that was very critical. Second, the struggle and the resistance is treated within the context of some agitation by lawyers and teachers. Okay, and that's not it. That those are symptoms of the problem, and we made sure the basis of negotiation must be in the context of the root cause of the crisis, not the symptoms. And that was also fitted into the commitment letter. So it was very critical for Ambazonia. Very great for us that we were able to insert the root cause. And what was the root cause? You can define it the way you want. It's that of occupation, illegal entry into Ambazonia, violation of Article 4, African Union Constitutive Act, violation of UN Charter. And then we move into the mandate. One of the things that AGOVC is not still happy and will not happen again. And I say this, it is not policy yet, but I've submitted this to be discussed as policy by the AGOVC, is that Switzerland did not live up to full expectation. Canada did not live up to.
Canada, not Switzerland, sir.
No, Switzerland, during its period of intention, did not live up to full expectation. Canada has not lived up to expectation. We will be requiring that going forward in these negotiations, you have more than one country, so that they are able to have discussions and block loopholes, have a kind of a mindset that is different. I don't want to go into the details, but there are things that we observe that we think could have been better, done in a better way. And we also think the Western approach to negotiating end of conflict is becoming mundane because it's locked into the liberal doctrine of democracy, peace, market stability, and stuff. It has not factored in key peripheral concepts that are critical for conflict resolution in certain areas, like self-determination, justice, identity questions. That has not really been factored in. And we think going forward, there must be a combination of the Western liberal model to conflict resolution and what I call the South model of conflict resolution that brings together, outcomes that are context driven. But we think within the Canada context, whether it's in the commitment or the mandate, both parties, and this was also very interesting, both parties gave Canada a mandate to facilitate negotiations based on the commitment letter that captures both identity and foundation of the trouble. So once that was negotiated, we negotiated the issue of prisoners. We got Cameroon to sign the release of all prisoners. Within 48 hours, I think 48 hours, Cameroon came back and said the insertion of the word all was problematic.
I remember.
Yes. We fought over that for 3 days. That they cannot release all. Yes, they can, but they cannot at one. We were not also willing to remove that all. Something we got. We were not willing to. But it was finally, it was a tough process. Cameroon requested that they should insert the release of prisoners through clemency and stuff. We said, no, you can't. This is an international agreement. These people have not committed any crime, and so by pushing for the insertion of the word clemency and whatever is is unacceptable.
And secondly, they are not even your citizens, so you cannot
Yeah.
grant clemency to people that
Yes.
are not citizens of your state.
Yes. So that's when the wit of law came in, and we provided to them some advice on how they can use their domestic processes. If they want to give Mr. Biya some glory, that's up to them, but that could not be coached within the context of an international agreement.
That's right.
So, but yeah, finally, the release was coached in a way that the release will be all, but not captured in that word, but in a what they call, I've forgotten the word that was inserted in.
It will be sequential.
Sequential.
I think the language
Yes.
was the sequential release of all
All.
prisoners. Yes.
Yes. Sequential release of all prisoners. So I'm having this conversation. So Ambazonians should never allow their victory that is earned through blood and toil to be snatched from them easily. It's
But it
like what we
seems
are
that,
saying.
Mr. President, it seems that's exactly what's about to happen.
No, no,
You
no,
can,
no.
you and the team and the delegates secured this extraordinary, significant, unprecedented victory. But then, what is being propagated out there by some that have switched sides, it's completely different. So it creates an atmosphere of distortion. And this is why it was important for you to address this issue, speak to the people, and give them a sense of clarity. Secondly, a few months ago, others, for whatever reason, instead of supporting something that has worked, they are now saying, hey, no, we should forget about all of that. Let's mobilize the international system and call for a referendum. What's your take in this conflicting approach to
Listen,
Amazonia?
first attempt to misrepresent what happened in Canada is uh, is personal for some. When I delegated DDC Kapo, I delegated him to go speak on behalf of the Ambazonian Governing Council and come back and present his report, and that was it. Okay, and I congratulated them for their achievement. Whatever he is spewing out there is irrelevant, totally irrelevant. And I don't have time discussing gutter politics. You know, what I do as a leader is such that we lead collectively. There is collective leadership within the Ambazonian Governing Council. We make decisions and we make sure that those decisions are for the interest of the movement and for the interest of the country. The attempt to use the prisoner issue is a sympathy vote. I don't need sympathy from prisoners. What they need from me is to free them. I don't need to go give bread to prisoners and let them carry banners for me. I don't need to go to Canada and come back and start saying I was fighting for you. No, I don't need sympathy from prisoners. Prisoners needs to be free. Okay, so I'm not going to be engaged in gutter politics. Nobody is going to misrepresent the Ambazonian victory. No one has that capacity. We are not in 1961 here. Second, political opportunism has no place in the liberation struggle. You talk about referendum. I know where the idea of a referendum came about. Okay? It's just that there are certain things in leadership You don't come here and you are having public discussion. Let Ambazonians know today. And also for you, I don't know if I've given you people the details of all of this. It was none of these people calling for a referendum. It was just political opportunism. The idea of a referendum was a bait, being thrown to Yaoundé. That, okay, if you don't want negotiation, okay, why don't you give a referendum to these people to determine their fate? It was kind of a bait. And political opportunists fell on it as though, they've conceived some idea of a referendum and they're running around with it. We don't need a referendum. We don't. Because all referenda historically have been offered by the occupying state. The United Nations, I was speaking with Dr. Henry of the city on the other day, and he made that clear. The United Nations has never organized any independence referendum. It has been organized mostly by the occupying state. And so you want to go and ask Cameroon to offer you a referendum? A country you've already defeated, rather than push your advantage and let them be the one to start begging you. In my two previous presentations, I presented case studies in history, whether in democracies or under autocracies, how the idea of a referendum came about. I put the case of Eritrea. Eritrea had already captured its capital, and for them, a referendum was a tool of legitimization and international recognition. Norway, it was within the context of a democracy, where the Danish king appointed, a wrong prime minister, not from the majority party, and the sitting prime minister called for a referendum on their independence. So when people get frustrated with failed strategies and they think that the Ambazonian struggle is a platform for political relevance in the face of death and destruction, they start throwing all of these aspersions and distractions so that they can still remain relevant at the expense of the Ambazonian people. What all of us need at this moment is to mobilize resources, continuously arm our forces to make sure that they can prevail over the enemy. And if there are any negotiations that will take place, we negotiate from a position of strength, exact enough reparation from the enemy for all the killings and murder that it has committed in our land.
You also, right after the Canada Pretalks, you also initiated something called the All Ambazonian Conference. There have been two All Ambazonia Conference tour by the constituting groups that went to Canada talks. Are you still interested in pursuing the All Ambazonia Conference as opposed to the other factions that are now pursuing the agenda of referendum?
No, for the record, the AGOC has, in the past week, informed the other movements that it is not the right time for that conference, and it is not going to commit as a convener for an all-Ambazonian conference. The other movements have not shown the level of seriousness. As we were having discussions in Canada, the unity amongst us was palpable. And I suggested that we use this positive spirit and bring our people together, mobilize, and increase the resistance. This was as far back, I think, as November.
It was in November, I remember.
Yes, I suggested the month of March, so that, because we were aware there will be the culmination of the talks in January. And I thought if we bring our people together, it will be an opportunity to build on the successes of collaboration during the Canada talks, to institutionalize some of the little victories, and establish a framework for negotiation that is acceptable to others, and agree on certain principles on how we can work together mobilized resources. We had specific issues, especially ones that was a bilateral agreement between the AGOC and the APLM, and one that was even suggested by the consortium on territorial static territorial control. So there was real excitement, but the agenda for the talks became thwarted. Because I don't want to get into all the innuendos. Continuous delay gave the opportunist an opportunity to begin to call for counter conferences. We had inspired, motivated the Ambazonian people by announcing, even the announcement, you realize that since Canada, the leaders haven't gone out, right?
Yeah, you guys are you're always supposed to
Yes, the other
make
leaders,
public statement. You're
yes,
always
the
supposed to
other
make
leaders,
public statement.
especially the IGK, especially the IGK has been the greatest obstacle to genuine collaboration and unity. And it has presented itself in building proxy alliances with SCNC and the consortium, and using all antics to somehow rebuild all of the factions that, the splinters, using all of those splinters to create a lot of negative atmosphere. Collaboration is as tough as negotiation. In collaboration, you have to find areas of common interest and discuss detailedly on the substantive issues around those areas and the procedures that can help you accomplish substantive agreements. They have not been interested in detailed discussions that will lead to what I call hard compromises, because the IGK is worried all the time any compromise of collaboration will somehow advantage the AGOC because its leader is in jail. So they are not interested in genuine discussions that can lead to collaboration. That's why even when we announced pre-Canada tours, only the AGOC arrived Toronto. It cost us thousands of dollars to move the vice president to Toronto. Dr. Akwanga had informed the team that he had an issue with his passport, and so that could be a reason, and he had not been well. The consortium never showed up. SNC never showed up. IG
Very
never showed
interesting.
up. Yes. We convened for Atlanta. None of them showed up. Okay? We convened for Minnesota. Only the consortium showed up late. So, and in the midst of all of this, you could see them in different networks, shoring up people who are creating confusion, who are attacking the integrity of the Ambazonian struggle in the name of attacking Ayaba. They are, through their actions, and they've refused that we even go out together. Why? Because they are in the background propping arsonists and confusionists to attack us, and so they feel ashamed sometimes to go in front and have the discussion with us. 11th of February, I asked that all of us go out and announce common actions. Nothing. I put out a program that we should at least discuss and see what we could do. Nothing. Elections of La République in March, the same. Nothing. Women's Day, nothing. 20th of May, nothing. So I can go on and on to demonstrate the bad faith of these people. But every day they are out there shouting, Ambazonia, we stand for the flag, we stand for the flag. No, they are not interested in Ambazonia. They are
What are they?
interested in.
If they are not interested, Mr. President, if they are not interested in Ambazonia, what are they interested in?
They are interested in relevance. For them, the struggle is a platform for political posturing. Look, liberation struggle is a place to go and die. If you are a movement leader in a liberation struggle, it's a place to go and die and go to jail. It's not a place to profile. Okay? The, it's a place to make hard decisions. It's a place to fight the enemy. Do you see them fighting the enemy? Do you see them enacting policies that undermines the enemy? So you ask yourself, what are they doing? Nothing. They are not doing anything. What they are interested in is creating unnecessary alarm. Once they, oh no, hey, stop the egg of sin now because they might do something that no. You don't see these people say this is 20th May. What is the common plan that we can do? We have made the decision for any discussion with any of them. There must be a public commitment to a declaration of principles. The egg of sea will no longer waste its time with arsonists, with political adventurers who are interested in political posturing in the face of a war of attrition against our people. We don't have the time. We will build relationship with foreign nationalist movement. And I use this opportunity to announce that this year is the 10th anniversary of the existence of the Ambazonian Governing Council. We will be celebrating the 10th anniversary in South Africa in 2024. And we will build relationship with foreign nationalist movement to help us to liberate Ambazonia. If we spend our time with these people, we will be giving a false sense of hope and giving them relevance when all they do is to attempt to subvert any action that can lead us to work together. You cannot imagine that we are planning an all Ambazonian conference and then we call for leaders to go around and talk to our people. None of them shows up. At one stage in Atlanta, I even worked hard to see that we secure a place where all of them could stay. I reached out to them. I even proposed that AGOVC, if it is an issue of money, AGOVC was ready to support any of them to travel. Nothing. So we will do it by ourselves. We are capable. We are going to work with the forces on the ground. We will support the forces on the ground as we have been doing. And we will make sure that we use our political leadership and wisdom in leadership to help these forces work together, overcome obstacles, mobilize resources, respect international law, and help us to make sure that we can liberate our homeland. Maybe at some stage, they will be ready to make the tough decisions that are required for collaboration. To collaborate in a liberation struggle, there should come a time when Dr. Cho Ayaba can say, all right, we push you forward. Or where the AGOVC can say, all right, you stand in front here. You must give up something. Okay? You must be ready to give up something to work together, or you must be able to agree on something like we agreed with the APLM. We could do joint leadership on issues. We get SOCADEF and ADF working together in Meme. They are together all the time. We talk to the commanders all the time. You don't find a leader who goes behind to subvert, to undermine you from behind, and then refuse to come in front and talk about unity. You talk an issue of taxation, you discuss with them, they are not interested because the people that they have pushed in front to attack us, they are afraid of them to present a case. You know, there's one tough person who has been doing his own stuff is JMA. You know, who has been taking firm stance that we think if we walk on, but also he faces his own wahala from the enabler called Fontem in his own group. You know,
So your new approach now is collaboration with other political movements in the diaspora is no longer a priority for the AGOVC. It's based on all these experiences of people not being interested, not being willing, not showing up, as you've cited here. You talked about a body of principles or declaration of principles. Is that a problem that your leadership, you are the most powerful movement, the most charismatic leader, you have the most powerful forces on the ground in 9 out of 13 states. So is it your inability to get these people to agree on this body of principles, or it's something within Ambazonians that they don't take the liberation struggle serious? What is it?
for these people in the diaspora, the liberation struggle is a platform. It's a platform that you use for temporal gains, for showmanship, for relevance, and sometimes it is born out of a culture of domination that once you are presented with an opportunity, lost identity, you want to make it manifest. And second is also is a lack of respect for ingenuity of the leadership we present and for the effort that we have brought to bear on our liberation struggle. And third, it is because they they have been part of the elitist configuration. The elitist mindset dictates that they must be in charge. And if they talk of unity, that unity means the kind of Ahijo unity where you must be under them. So they do not have a nationalistic mindset that says, now, we have to recognize who we are. It's unspoken law. When I sit with the other leaders, we sit as equals. I know their strength. They know my strength. But those are not things we talk about. They are irrelevant, right? We should equally respect each other, irrespective of our strength. But there must be a recognition of the contribution each can make. There is the lack of that recognition. The fifth is fear that, for example, when the IG care invited me for the launch of the Bank of Ambazonia, I went there. I gave them support. You think if the AGOVC will invite them, they are going to come? Do you think if it was the AGOVC, they would not have gone out and begin to attack it, that it's not time to create a bank? But do you think the Bank of Ambazonia is just going to appear once we secure our borders? You begin to produce prototypes. Sometimes the differences we have is putting out these programs and having an entitlement to say everyone must be under it. The AGOVC does not believe in that kind of a philosophy. We believe that if we put the liberation tax, it's up to you to accept it. If you want to implement it in the area you control, it's up to you. But we present a law that we think can help build a better relationship between our forces and our population, and brings accountability to the forces who collect funds from our people. The funds don't have names. The funds are not they are not defined. They are not held in trust. They are not accounted for, and it is duplicated. You collect monies here, this one comes to the same place, and so it creates a lot of tension between our forces. But it's up to the different forces to implement in their zone. So we believe very strongly that movements should be ingenious in proposing ideas that can strengthen and foster collaboration and our liberation struggle. But these people, for them, the liberation struggle is a platform. Use the platform for whatever kind of adventure and experiment. That's what they are doing on a daily basis and creating enough confusion. We have made a firm decision. The commitment to principle to declaration of principles states clearly that you have to publicly commit for the independence of Ambazonia and the different processes that can lead to that independence. You have to sign that declaration, all of us, before we believe in your commitment to this. You have to commit to stop fostering division through proxies and undermining the integrity of the Ambazonian struggle. There are basic things that we can commit to that will undermine those peripheral voices and noises that continuously make Ambazonians believe that they cannot have their freedom. We know very strongly that these people are an obstacle. They are not a breach. They are an obstacle. You take the case of forces that are deserting. I presented a clear-cut research outcome the other day on a study made by two researchers in 2021, a quantitative analysis that studied 21 or 17,000 rebels from the FARC movement who had deserted. And they established clearly that desertion, one of the principal reasons why forces desert from different movements is because the absence of command and control, the collapse of the structure of command and control. And it is always easy to see these men who move into La République, is it DDR or what do they call it, center, the DDC or DDR?
DDR, yes.
Yeah, DDR. It's always easy to throw blame on them. But these boys left being carpenters, bricklayers, mechanics, and came into a force. They came with individual preferences. It was responsibility of leadership to build an ideology that they subscribe to espouse a common vision that they believe in, and to institute a common approach that they can abide to. And they then surrender their individual preferences for a common vision, a common ideology, and common practices which they can now foster. But the collapse of the structure makes them to return back to their individual preferences, one of which is survival. And they get up every morning, they hear you people shouting on social media, attacking each other. You fail to provide weapons, fail to provide food, fail to provide support. You do not even support them in your public speeches. They don't hear you encourage them for them. They don't hear you speak about them. They don't hear you thank them. In the face of the collapse of a structure, they are left with no other option than saying, oh, why should I die for something where others are there making noise, stealing money, and playing games? And they fall in the arms of the butchers and killers of their people. What is our response? Yeah, we can attack them. We can call them traitors. Yeah, they are. Because there is no justification even when you reach that stage. But true leadership is required that you are able to build a command and control structure that makes sure that those individual preferences that brought forces together are kept aside for the common vision, common purpose, and common ideology that should continuously bond them. And that's what I have been trying to do on the ground with all the forces, irrespective whether they are ADF. And I said to them the other day, work with me. In a liberation war, you don't have space for experiment. There is no other leader that they can produce at this stage. Maybe tomorrow. There is no other Ambazonian leader who can stand and speak for our forces, for our people, defend Ambazonia, be firm and inspire our people not to give up. There is one, and that's me. Until you find another one, you are left with no choice than to deal with the one that has produced result. And I have asked the forces to work with me. Otherwise, the little structures they've had will collapse. It will be infiltrated, manipulated, hijacked, and then marketed to the enemy by design or just by omission. So I think the time has come for, we have made a lot of effort to try to see that we can work together. But it looks like our openness to go to others, to try to bridge the gap, to work together, has always been interpreted as, when I struggled to work with Mr. Ayuk, they said I needed his legitimization. Oh, I had wanted Ayuk to appoint me. Oh, I wanted the IG care members to support AGOVC. You see how they took a desire for us to work together as an abuse. And I think we reach out to consortium to try to see if we can have a bilateral to identify areas of common interest that we can work together. They played up and down. You know, the only movement that was willing to see that we can find a common approach, and you can see it in the result in Neme, is the APLM. And we will continue to pursue those options, but our focus as the Ambazonian Governing Council is to build alliances with external nationalist movements that are serious and will only work with movements within Ambazonia that commit to a body of principles that will undermine their divisive approaches, the approaches that undermine Ambazonian nationalism, undermines the integrity of our struggle, and engender political posturing, all sort of shenanigans. You find individuals with virtually just a microphone. They will go and gather themselves somewhere and be putting proclamation. They have no respect for different movements. They have virtually no respect for the hard work, that is required for Ambazonia to be free.
Thank you very much for providing such a level of insight into what's going on. What advice would you give? Recently, we've seen the one day in Santa move to DDR, and then this week we've seen Shina Rambo move to DDR. You've given us the explanation. What advice would you give these forces, even when they are facing tough times, that your leadership, the Ambazonia Governing Council, and its structures on the ground under the Ambazonia Defense Forces can be a place that welcomes them for the practical collaboration you want to set up? What message do you have for these forces? Because there are many of them, and all this movement out here, I have been using them since 2017 for their own political relevance, without any responsibility and accountability to these forces.
Treason. They've used these boys, they've frustrated them, they have abused them, and but does that give them any reason to join the genocides? So if you compare the way that these movements have treated these guys and Ambazonians with the way that Cameroon has treated us, would you really move over to Cameroon? How shameful can that be? That even in the face of difficulties, you decide to move into the arms of the butchers and killers of your people. And that's not all. And you become their tool to identify those who standing in resistance in the defense of our homeland. Irrespective of your hardship, you will be known forever as a traitor and as a coward. And we will hunt you. At any opportunity, we will kill you. You have a choice. Put your number on the screen. All of you, Shina Rambo, you know, if you are hiding somewhere in the arms of the enemy, you know the effort after you became frustrated, the support scheme that the ADF tried to provide to you. Tried to give you back hope and a base. And you decided to betray your men and women in arms and your people and become a tool to the enemy until you will die. Because if the enemy does not kill you, we will kill you. So I'm sending this message to all Amazonian forces. Yesterday I had discussions about some in a particular location. It was brought to my attention, their situation. I have offered 6 assault rifles. That is a promise I made yesterday when their situation was brought to my attention. There are 2 groups. I've offered for 1, 5. If they behave themselves, they move from where they are into an ADF barrack, work there for a while, we reconstitute them and go and install them back. We will provide them subsequently with 5 rifles to defend themselves. There's another one in a particular location that was also brought to my attention. And I have said immediately we can provide an assault rifle, but the person must spend some time within an ADF barrack before we take the person back to their area. If you are in distress, if you are frustrated, if you are confused, we will move you from where you are to an ADF barrack where you can be there, you feel at home, you fight with your brothers and your sisters, you rejuvenate yourself, and then if you want to go back in your area, we will take you there, provide you the foundation support. There is another one from a renowned force in an area that was even more armed than the ADF. They called me, took me on a video call to one of the old fathers of one of the top commanders of that force. And the papa asked me, I'm handing this child to you. I'm handing this child to you. And since then, I've been communicating, providing some small subsistence, trying to see what we can do to secure their lives. Because they become so frustrated that their safety becomes paramount. And without a voice, without an ear to listen to them, they are listening to scarecrows, to traitors who are giving them promises to enter La Republique's dungeons. And I really want to appeal to all Ambazonian forces. You cannot make a mistake. There is evidence. The other balloons that escaped there, some of them have escaped back into ground 1. They spoke for the enemy. All of them are prisoners. All of them who have gone into the La Republique dungeons called DDR are prisoners until you are killed by La Republique or we find you and take you out. But you have a choice. Reach out to me directly if you cannot reach out to any of my top advisors. Reach out and we will make sure that you are taken care of. And do not allow yourself to be abused, to be treated like a political ping pong for the relevance of individuals sitting in their comfort in distant places. This is a war we have won. And this is a time that we must rebuild our forces in terms of manpower and in terms of logistics, and to give them the opportunity to continue to make gains as we have been seeing across the territory in the past days.
we would like you to talk a little bit about your new pivot, which you have laid out, and your policy of territorial control on the ground in terms of how you want ground control through institutions that gives power back to the Ambazonian people and diplomacy. You've launched a program called the Ambazonian um, ADLA, Ambazonia Transition Liberation Authority, in all ADF control areas. You've also launched the liberation tax to be implemented in those areas. How does bringing these new forces, these loose groups that have existing on their own, how do you bringing them into to work with the ADF, collaborate with the ADF? How does it fit with your policy of ground control in terms of ADLA? And how would this help the Ambazonian people to have hope that this will work for the future negotiation?
The objective of liberation is self-government. The objective of liberation is to be able to govern yourself. And 7 years into this war, we institute policies and adopt different practices to foster the liberation agenda, to consolidate our gains, and to undermine any regression that may come about as a result of increase in the diversion in terms of strategy of the opponent. So leadership within the context of such a complex liberation space is dynamic. The strategies we put in place at the beginning of this war were designed to liberate. They were not designed to create alternative institutions to fill ungovernable spaces and to provide some level of support. The other strategy of delegitimization required the dismantling of occupation institution, which our people had relied on since they were born. And once you dismantle this institution, we did not immediately factor what replacements we'll have in place for the provision of services. Because in liberation, you don't spend your initial resistance phase or liberation phase in thinking of alternative institutions. Because also, we believe that Ambazonia is constituted in a traditional system, whether they are even through quarter heads, through chiefs, different community setups. And we knew once we dismantle the institutions of occupation to achieve the political objective of delegitimization, our population will tend to self-help, relying on the local institutions that had been a foundation both in our history and in our fledgling democracies from the 50s. In the wake of the successes that we had, what we did not factor immediately was the fact that some of those traditional institutions had been created by the enemy and implanted within our communities. Some had been bribed by the enemy to speak for them, to fan tribal hatred and division. The elites who come from these places were the principal tools that the enemy was using, to undermine progress within our communities. So the ungovernable spaces that were created through the demise of the institutions of the occupier were then taken over by proxies of the occupier deliberately even La Republic soldiers infiltrated those spaces, stealing, harassing, and extorting. Common criminals also infiltrated those spaces and started causing havoc within communities. Loose forces without command and control also took advantage of these ungovernable spaces and engaged in harassment. This widened the gap between our forces and our population. And this permitted the enemy to infiltrate our population, promising them to be the custodians of their lost system. And we had to act. We had to begin to create institutions that mitigate the infiltration of the enemy and mitigate the excesses of these various elements that had infiltrated these ungovernable spaces. And that's why we created the ADLA. And we advise that ADLA should be constituted in a way that brings together different stakeholders within our communities to form a common platform within which they can solve problems, they can identify little conflicts, anticipate issues, and bring peace within the communities so that our forces can remain the defenders of the territory rather than the police of the ungovernable spaces. But secondly, for independence to be independence, you must not only dismantle the institution of the enemy and then create those ungovernable spaces, refuse to fill them, and then the enemy start delegating proxy institutions that come and fill those spaces, and your population begin again to depend on the institutions of the enemy for public services. You will never achieve true independence if your population fully depends on the enemy for the provision of public services. If you say there should be no schools because of A, B, and C, you must anticipate that you can't keep children at home forever. And you cannot go back to your vomit and start drinking it simply because you want your children to go to school, or you were unprepared to provide an alternative form of education. We created the community schools and began to encourage our people to believe in their own institutions, to take ownership. And we started providing opportunities for teachers. We started providing opportunities for health practitioners within our communities to be able to look after our population, to create a healthy population for purposes of development. The institutionalization of our gains is the only way we can survive. If we think we will simply dismantle La Republique's institutions and fail to create our own, La Republique is going to use proxy elements to create enough destabilization as to turn the population against our forces. We are not a struggle that is supported by a neighboring country where you say we have endless flow of resources and materials and manpower. We are an internal resistance force. And what props recruitment is one, excitement, and two, power. At the beginning is excitement, the desire to defend, to be a hero. As you go longer into the struggle is power. As you grow stronger, providing opportunities, you have new recruits. And the tax law we are putting in place, this is very important. When we instituted the liberation tax on businesses, I said we might succeed 15%, 20% in terms of revenue collection, but we will succeed 100% in terms of political statement. Only who has territorial control institute taxes. Only he who owns the land has the power to institute taxes. We were able to communicate strongly to our population and the international community that we are the authority of the land and we are the ones who are supposed to institute and collect taxes. And we have been very successful. Now, going forward, we have assessed the progress of the struggle. We have made an assessment in terms of the institutionalization processes. Every war, whether it's interstate war or intrastate war, wars of liberation, wars of survival, or whatever, those conducting the war have instituted some form of taxation to mobilize resources for the prosecution of that war. You cannot simply depend on the goodwill of the people. Because in times when things are bad, the people's goodwill will be tested and they will not commit. And we also recognize our forces have been collecting funds from the ground. What is the name given to those funds they collect? Support. What is support? How do you quantify? How do you codify support? What we are trying to do is to codify that support, to give it a legal name. Every money that you are required to pay to constituted authorities, it's a tax. And so we want to codify that support and regulate that support so that forces don't collect money from the same person. Take, for example, we hear forces are going, when somebody dies, they go there to collect money. It's unacceptable. How do you regulate those kinds of things? We hear forces set up checkpoints, they collect money from people, 500 here, 500 there. No. If you codify a law that says transport cars plying a particular highway will pay maybe a toll gate, the driver will pay, not the passengers. If you put another law that says every Ambazonian male pays 10,000 a year, female 5,000 a year, all the passengers in that car must have paid their dues. And they don't need to spend 500 on soldiers. And what will happen? You will provide funding for our own institutions like public health services, for our schools, and for other institutions that can cater for our people in this period of transition. Number two, if a soldier is, number two, you would strengthen the forces. Once they are well armed, they can protect you. If there is harassment in a particular area, a well-armed force will dispatch forces there to make sure it brings order. If you are at a cry die and you find some rogue forces coming there, you can call a well-constituted force that will send men to come there and make sure that they disperse those rogue forces. You make sure that in protected areas, we can have hospitals that are protected. If a soldier is wounded in an area where we don't have static control, that soldier can be moved into that protected area for treatment. If a soldier like Shina Rambo, who becomes confused and knows that we have a protected area, they can simply move into that protected area for transitional sanctuary. We should not look at the money. We should look at the opportunities that such massive mobilization of resources by our people will bring. The enemy is scared. Only in Bamenda alone, of 500,000 people, if 100,000 are able to give just 10,000 to our forces, it will be 1 billion. That 1 billion will provide about 300 assault rifles, 200,000 seats. With 300 well-armed men, you think you'll be harassed on the street by even La République terrorists? With 300 well-armed men, you think somebody is going to seize your cell phone? Somebody is going to just come and kidnap you for ransom? Somebody is going to come and harass you at a cry die place? Somebody is going to threaten your life in the night? Or your son will just be shot on the street and get rot there? No. It would have cost you just 10,000 amber a year to constitute a force that can provide you protection, provide you hope, defeat the enemy, and guarantee that there are services that can be protected within areas of static control. This is how you become free. This is what they call independence. The alternative is noise.
Thank you very much, sir. We have come to the end of this interaction. We are very grateful for declassifying the information that you've been able to share with the public today and to help the public to understand where their liberation was, where their expectation was, and where they need to be, what policies will work, what we want. We are very grateful. Do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you very much, Mr. Spokesman. Thanks to all the Ambazonian people. Thanks for your resilience and for your continuous commitment to our freedom. This is a struggle for the Ambazonian people to gain their freedom from the banality of evil of Cameroon. Cameroon is an evil state that wishes us no good. It is not a state that, even by its intentions, you can have hope that it can change. It cannot, because Cameroon has classified us as liabilities. Our land is an asset that they should exploit without any reciprocation in development. For 62 years, Cameroon has denied us basic opportunities in our land, including education. It has allowed our institutions to crumble, letting people die in the corridors of hospitals. Hospitals have become places where people go and get more diseases and they die. Even to bury our people, you cannot bury your own loved ones with dignity. They have caused our young people to escape the country, abandoning their parents, creating gaps in societies that they are filling. They have used their power in finances to buy our land, to establish themselves within our country, to open businesses, to create opportunities for themselves, and accumulate a lot of wealth from our country, which they have shipped into theirs for development. They have set up companies that have continuously caused capital flight, where the price of alcohol marketed by this contraband company called Brazaris, even if it goes to 1,000, you are so desperate because you are so attached to it because you cannot live without it. They raise 200 billion a year from Ambazonia. 99% is shipped back into La Republique for opportunities for them. If you see the people working, 90% come from their own territory. They have set up MTN, where they've imposed taxes. They have not opened a technology school where you say they can train Ambazonians to become workers within all of these technology companies that have been created within Ambazonia. Their aim is to amass enough money. You cannot find any school they have built. You cannot find hospitals they have built. You cannot find training of your own young children. The only thing our children do is set up call boxes to be selling, and they never can survive with that. That is your fate under Cameroon. Endele had warned us clearly in the 50s that any attempt to navigate towards Cameroon is navigation into hell. Our experiences is not something we are conjuring. For 62 years, political participation non-existent. Opportunities for our people has never existed. They have treated us using our resources like we are people who need handouts. They have recruited from amongst us beneficiaries. We are fighting now against these beneficiaries, the so-called elites, the enablers who have benefited from this system and will do everything to continue to benefit from it at your own expense. Since 1990, this woman that we captured in Bamenda, I've forgotten her name, has been
Mundi.
in power. Since 1990, we were on the street in 1992 fighting them after John Fundi won an election. They took it from him, locked him up in his house. They have scraped his own political party until he exists now at their mercy. Finally, they've integrated him into their own core. That is the journey of our people. You don't integrate, they put you in jail or they kill you. Until we came around to say, no, we must live in dignity. We must live in peace. We must live in our land and enjoy the opportunities that the bounties of our land provide. We are humans with rights to be able to be employed, to create companies that produce things that are tangible, to be respected when you go out. We are not asking for any inch of Cameroon's land. We are not a threat to Cameroon's independence. We are fighting for our freedom. Cameroon is simply the obstacle. If things are hard, think about what it has been for 62 years. The people who have burned your villages, the people who have burned your homes, the people who have cattled to your children and sent to Yaoundé where they have been subjected to torture, the people who cut Samsoya's head, who burn Mami Api, who kill Baby Mata, who dismantle your institutions, socio-economic and political. They are the people you see with armor cars on your street. The Bulu terrorists, they are Cameroonians, fugitives that you provided them sanctuary when they were facing a war of liberation from the UPC. They want to attack our forces. The killers of our people are not the Ambazonian forces. The butchers of our people are not the Ambazonian forces. The Ambazonian forces may have their limitation, but they are brave people fighting without salary, without holidays, without food, without break, without uniform, with chang shoes, bare feet, without bullets, to defend the freedom of our people. And we will not blink. We will produce weapons of war that will deliver death to La République du Cameroon until they leave. We will arm every Ambazonian until every child born on day one is able to identify the enemy and know what to do against the enemy. This is what it has taken most countries to move from a state of dilapidated occupation to the triumphant pedestal of freedom and economic prosperity, where sometimes we long to fly into those places. The graves of heroes buried in cemeteries in the United States or in Eritrea, in South Africa, speaks of the sacrifices that others make. And I enjoin all of you, Ambazonians, to speak up when it's necessary, to stand up when it's necessary, to fight for Ambazonia. The past 7 years has been daunting because of deliberately engineered and delivered confusion in the body politics of our struggle. 7 years after, you should know who is leading you. You should know who speaks for you. When we are free, those who want to become president, prime ministers, will have the opportunity to register within their constituency, get themselves elected in parliament. The majority party selects the prime minister. I also want to assure you, as I promise, this year we will elect the first Ambazonian mayor. We will continue to expand into different areas, build the capacity of our forces, work with our population. Freedom is a mindset. You believe you are free, you accept that you are free, then you stand to defend that freedom. If you doubt your freedom, you surrender to servitude. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, leader of the Ambazonian people, Dr. Cho Lucas Ayaba. And for the Ambazonian people, thank you very much for being active participant on this program. Have a great night.